Hey, Kiwi.
Uh-huh.
Kiwi.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking about getting another gun to do like a review or something on. Got any ideas?
How about the SLR?
Nah, that's not CQB enough.
The L115.
That's a sniper rifle.
Yeah, CQB. Look, it's got a folding stock.
No.
How about this?
Nah, I don't want to show off the L85A2.
No? Alright. This?
Nah, that's too tan.
Surely this would be good then.
That's the same rifle.
Well, yeah, it's in black like yours.
No, I don't want to show off the A3.
Now this would float your boat, right?
Ooh, that's looking more like it, but smaller.
This?
No, smaller again.
This?
No, that's too small.
Too short? Right. This.
That's the same.
Wait, hang on.
You know what that just might do?
There you go.
Yeah, this could work.
But by the way, you really should get yourself checked out. Talking to yourself is not good.
Oh, you can talk. So today we're having a look at this, the Cyma CM041K-PDW, or as we commonly refer to it, the Cyma MP5K-PDW. So I've had this one for about 6 months now, so I thought it's about time I share my opinions of it and give you a bit of an overview of the rifle. But before we dive on into this, the Airsoft version, let's talk a bit about the history of the real steel version. So the PDW has a long lineage behind it, going through the MP5K, the standard MP5s, all the way through the HK33 and the G3 semi-rifles, which were designed way back in the early 50s. They're all based around H&K's roller delayed blowback system, which works on everything from this 9mm round here up to the big full power 7.62 round. So the MP5 was introduced in about 1965. The MP5K, which was the very much cut down version of the MP5, they shortened the receiver, they put a blanking plate on the end with a sling loop, no stock. They cut the barrel right down to this length without a flash suppressor, so it was just a front end. And it was aimed for things like VIP close protection units and clandestine operations where you need a concealed weapon that packs a lot of punch. Then the PDW version, which saw the folding stock, the flash hider, and also the 3-lug locking system and threaded muzzle device installed, and used originally the Navy trigger group, which was in the safe, single, 3-round burst and full auto positions, came about in 1991. Which was really interesting of H&K to do because there were no other PDWs hitting the market in 1991.
Actually, it's a P90.
So yes, I think part of the reason this rifle came about was to be a direct competitor to FN's P90, which was hitting the market. But overall, you have a very compact little package for storage, say if you're a driver or a tank crew, but you have a folding stock so you can use it like a traditional rifle and get a bit more accuracy out of a very small weapon system. So that's enough about the history of the MP5K. Let's dive on into this, the Airsoft version. Right, so let's have a look at the features of the Cyma MP5K-PDW. Now the standout one is obviously the folding stock. With it extended, it's very solid, there's only a little bit of side-to-side wiggle, but it's certainly enough for you to get a good stable shooting position while using it. And also with it folded away, it stays firmly against the side of the rifle and won't just flop about and fall out, which is very nice to see. To the side of the folding stock we have a sling loop, which is very good because you can have a sling on it without it changing position too much between having the stock open and folded, which is great because you can have it slung, draw the rifle, open the stock up very quickly and get your shots on target. Moving forwards along the rifle, we have our selector switch with 3 positions, safe, semi and fully automatic. The selector is ambidextrous and as such has the same controls mirrored on the other side of the receiver. Now unlike the real one, it doesn't have the 3-round burst. That's because this rifle is very basic on the inside. There's no kind of electrical control system, so it's going to be very hard for it to have a 3-round burst mode. To be honest though, that's not too bad, and because MP5s are so switchable with their parts, there have been MP5Ks without the Navy style of trigger group, so this is passable. Coming on forwards again, we have our mag releases. Yes, I say releases, there are 2. there is the flappy paddle, and there is also the push button, which you can just about reach if you have long index fingers. Coming on forwards again, we have our charging handle over on the left side, which does work when you don't have a battery in it. If you have a battery in it, you'll be pushing on the battery with it and you can damage your wiring, so don't cock it with a battery in. It doesn't have any purpose other than pushing the battery out when you're changing it, as the bolt is an integral part of the upper receiver and it doesn't actually move or exist on this, as where it would be is where the battery goes. Coming forwards, we find the forward grip assembly, which is part of the rifle package and is on the real steel. It's very nice to see on this such a small weapon, as you can't really get your hand up and around it like a standard MP5, so you need this grip to give you a nice solid 3 positions for shooting. That's forehand, rear hand and shoulder. And then coming forward again, we see the flash hider, which is removable, and underneath we find the 3 lug locking positions found on many MP5s and a thread cover for threaded accessories.
Muggins here forgot to mention that the threads are 14mm counterclockwise, so they should take most standard airsoft accessories.
Moving along the top, we see our standard ring covered front iron sight and rear barrel, which you can adjust between different apertures. However, for airsoft, just leave it on the biggest one and hopefully you'll be able to hit something. Now, additional features you could have, but we don't have on this rifle, is you can put sight rails on this. Put that on, then you can put a sight on top of it, and it's your standard claw mount like every MP5 out there.
So since filming out in the field, I've actually managed to pick up a claw mount to mount on the MP5. It actually came off of a G3 I bought recently. But here we go. Here is an EOTech mounted on the claw mount, which is mounted to the MP5K. I think it looks pretty snazzy.
So I can't get it to lock up on semi no matter how hard I try. Now admittedly, it's a very long trigger pull. The very long trigger pull, so keep going, keep going, keep going, and break. Some would describe that as spongy, but to be honest, I have no problem with it. So put the mag back in. Very snappy on semi, and let's just see how it does on full auto with a 7.4. Respectable rate of fire. I'd say that's a bit slower than the real steel, but it's perfectly adequate for airsoft use. So I think that covers the external features of this. Let's jump on back to the office and have a look at what came in the box and the internals of this.
So the box is pretty basic cardboard with black and white printing on it, showing off the MP5Ks and a big tick in which one we've got in the box. Lifting that up, we can then see the 2 big chunky bits of foam that hold everything in place, with the manuals and the cleaning rod on top. It's a pretty standard cleaning rod and way longer than the barrel on this, so that's all good. You can see it has an unjamming and a cleaning end. And looking through the manuals, we see we're giving 2 here, a separate MP5K/PDW exploded diagram and parts list, and then weirdly an instruction manual for a full-size MP5. So whilst most of the instructions apply to this, it's a bit weird because it's different battery loading and that's not really covered in that. So it's a bit of a weird one, but it saves them on printing costs. Still, it would have been nice to see a proper manual for the MP5K. So with the foam out of the way, let's have a look. We'll grab the accessories box. Now the vendor I bought this off has taken the charge and thrown that away because it's not correctly CE marked. Fair enough. Also in there is a bag of BBs, which I highly recommend also throwing away. Now moving on to the exciting bits, here we find the mid cap that comes with it, which is in fact stamped steel externals. There's no markings on it and I'm not entirely sure what the capacity of it is, but it's definitely sub 100. And then hidden under a nice little flap on the left side of the box we find the battery that comes with it. Now personally I didn't find this battery very useful. I found that it would lock up very often on semi, so I would like to throw it away and instead install a 7.4 in my gun. And finally the RIF itself, which we can see here in all its glory. Now that we've got it out of the box, let's have a look at how to install the battery. For reference, I'm going to be putting in a 1450 mAh 7.4 LiPo from Uprol. First things first, we need to take off the front pin holding the handguard on. Now this also doubles as a sling loop, so it has a very stiff spring holding it on. I tend to use a small tool, normally the back of the tweezers, to push this spring in to pull the pin out. Once the pin is out, the handguard can be tilted downwards and then forwards on off the rifle, exposing our battery connectors. Note here I've put Deans onto this rifle, however in stock configuration it comes with mini to mirror connectors. Now we need to remove the stock off the rifle to install the battery. To do this, push out the 2 pins, and with those out, the stock can be pulled out the back of the rifle. Now we can insert the battery, connector first, into the top of the receiver. This slides all the way forwards until the connectors come out the front of the receiver. Now this is quite fiddly to do with Tamiya and even harder to do with Dean, so I recommend having a pair of tweezers or a screwdriver to hand to help pull it out and push it into place. Now that the connector is in place, the battery can be connected up and we can put the gun back together. First we can reinstall the handguard and the front sling loop pin, and then we can put the stock back on and push in its 2 pins. Here we have the weapon reassembled and ready to go. Now removing the battery is a very similar process to installing the battery and requires both the stock and the handguard to be taken off. Once they're off and the battery is disconnected, you can then try and push the wires up and into the receiver to push it out, and then use the mock charging handle to help guide it out, or as I found the quite easy approach is to put the gun with muzzle up and just tap it against your palm, and the battery should then drop out into your hand. Overall, the battery installation and removal process is not the most straightforward and certainly not the easiest, but once you know what you're doing, you can get it done fairly quickly. Now, being such a compact weapon, the hop-up adjustment is not exactly straightforward either. On other versions of MP5s, the hop-up adjust can either be accessed externally, just in front of the receiver, or by pulling back on the charging handle, pulling the bolt back, and then accessing it internally. Unfortunately, this hop is neither external nor hidden behind the mock bolt, because there is no mock bolt as it's an integral part of the receiver in this design, so instead, to adjust the hop, the front handguard has to be removed as if we were changing the battery. Once it's off, you can find a black slider to adjust the hop and another little arrow and text telling you which way adds more hop. Then you can simply slide that forwards and back to get the correct hop setting, and once you're happy with that, you can reinstall the handguard. Now this is all fine and dandy for setting up before a game, but in the middle of the firefight it's not exactly easy to adjust your hop if you need to. But hopefully that doesn't happen too much, and for the most part you're going to be using this in a CQB environment, and really over a 10-meter range your hop shouldn't matter all that much. Now, unlike the battery installation and hop-up adjustment process, disassembly of this is actually relatively straightforward, requiring very minimal tools, just a crosshead and a couple of Allen keys, and you can have this apart very quickly. All you have to do once you've got to the battery installation stage is pop out the last pin holding the upper and lower receiver together and slide them apart. And then, with only a couple of Allen keys and crosshead screws removed, you can then take out the V3 gearbox from the lower receiver. And yes, I do say V3 gearbox. Most MP5s tend to come with a V2 gearbox in, however the MP5K versions come with the V3 gearbox. Now here I have a quick shot of my M16 and my AK-74. The M16 has the V2 in and the AK-74 has the V3 in, and what we can see is the V3 does not have that top fin running along it with the screws in, and instead is flat and has a plate on top, which makes it much better for putting batteries directly above the gearbox, which coincidentally is where the battery goes in the MP5K. Just going to interrupt the teardown quickly to talk about that motor. It's a long type motor in a V3 gearbox setup, which is a bit weird to see, but it's how the MP5Ks work. Also, it is a very stiff to turn motor and very strong magnets on it. In fact, I can lift it up with quite a small Allen key, which is good to see. That's probably going to be quite a torquey motor, which I'm very impressed with. Very good job, Cyma. Once we've got the gearbox out of the lower, we can find that it has no quick change spring guide, which is not a deal breaker, but it certainly would have been a nice to have. It just makes disassembly that bit harder because you've still got the main spring tension in there. But with it popped open, let's have a look inside and see what we've got. We have a metal spring guide with bearings on it, which is good to see. We can also see there is a lot of green snot in this, which normally indicates that it's not very well shimmed and they've just thrown grease at it to try and cover up the bad noise. Picking up the gears, we can see there they are Cyma's standard affair of MIM gears. They're good, but they're not the best. If you're going to replace them, probably get some CNC gears in there. And looking underneath that, we find their standard cross-type bushings. Don't understand why they use cross types still. Looking at the shimming, we've basically got one meteor shim aside of a gear, so obviously not the best shimming in the world, probably why they've thrown a load of grease. Still, it gets the job done, the gears turn. Now, onto the compression parts. well, I say compression parts, there isn't really any compression in it. I did try stretching the O-ring a bit and greasing it up, but still wasn't getting all the best compression, so it probably will be an O-ring replacement job there. But we have the right size cylinder for the barrel, which is the half port for the short barrel that we have. The cylinder head itself is plastic with a single O-ring and a pad, and the nozzle on it is made of clear plastic and doesn't have an O-ring in it. And looking at the piston, it is your standard white Cyma piston with one metal tooth. No complaints there. I quite like the Cyma pistons. It is a ported piston head. I just think the O-ring is probably a bit too small to give us a good seal. Flipping the piston around and looking inside it, we don't find any bearings, but that's fine because there are bearings on the spring guide. And finally, looking at the electronic side of things, there isn't any electronic trigger in this. This is just your standard contacts, which is absolutely fine. It will get the job done. You can either wire in a MOSFET to that if you so wish, or you can rip that out and replace it with a smart MOSFET at a later date. So overall, what do I think of the internals? Well, it is a solid V3 gearbox. It is the Cyma V3 gearbox, the one that keeps on trucking. But there are still some issues. I would personally replace the bearings, put in a MOSFET, and re-shim it so it's actually shimmed well. Yes, it's good to see that they've got a nice strong motor in there, but it is not LiPo ready. However, running it on the 7.4 will still be fine. It won't burn out the trigger contacts quickly. It will eventually. But I personally would rig an inline MOSFET into this like a Gate Nano ASR, and it should just keep trucking. Now, is it bang for buck though? That's an interesting one. If this was 2018, I would say, yeah, I've paid about 150 quid for the gun. I've got a very solid basic V3 gearbox in it. But more and more guns these days are coming out with things like quick change spring guides and ETUs in them. Hell, Cyma's CM009 range, the M16A1 that I reviewed last year, that came with a quick change spring guide and an ETU in it. Granted, it's not the best ETU in the world, but it's still there for the price. So, 2018 me would say, yes, decent, good value for money. 2021 me? Maybe they could have done more. And on that note, let's jump on over to see how it performs out in the field. Now, for reference, I've had this for 6-ish months now and taken it to quite a few games and put several thousand rounds through it. And for the most part, I can say, in kind of CQB engagement ranges, the BBs will go where you point it. So I found it to be pretty good. For reference, I've been running ASG Blaster 0.28 in it and found that to be really good. I can reach out a bit further, out to 40-50 meters, not necessarily one shot, one hit. You have to put a couple downrange, but you can do it. I've run it in a primary role as well as in a sidearm role for when I was using my sniper, and I found it works well in both cases. So I've got a couple of shots here from games. Now, I have to apologise, the camera I was using was slightly off on a wonk, so you get a lot of gun and not much where I'm shooting, but you can hear people calling hit as I'm playing. So the first one, I'm using it as a sidearm, pushing through some brush, carrying the sniper in my other hand, so I'm one-handing it, and I'm still managing to get hits at 10 to 20, maybe even 30 meter ranges. And then the last couple of clips is me using it as a primary in CQB environments, both through buildings and also in a trench system. So sit back and watch and see what you think. Cheers, bud. Sorry. Loading 5, dead! Hit!
I mean, brave, but stupid.
Yeah.
Welcome to Gunman Marshals.
Yep. Good take, buddy. It's all well and good seeing gameplay footage, but then that's kind of factoring in player skill as opposed to just raw weapon performance. So let's go back to Wales, put it clamped on the table and do a grouping test.
Right, so in typical fashion, it's July, it's Wales, I'm trying to film a video outdoors and now it's raining, so I apologise for that. But let's crack on with the range test. Here I have the Cyma MP5K mounted up on the table. Over there we have a box about the size of a human torso, set up at about 30 metres. Got a camera filming that so we can see where the BBs hit. So let's make sure the mag is wound. Put our iPro on, make sure it's in semi, make sure it's aligned. It is. It's not, hang on. There we go. And let's take 10 shots. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Safe. So, 10 rounds, 8 of them hit, 2 of them went just off the edge of the box. Let's go back to the office and have a look at that in post. So overall I'm pretty happy with that. Sure, we didn't get all 10 on target, but we did manage to get 8 out of 10 onto a human sized box at 30-ish metres. Your first, if not second shot is definitely going to hit a player. So overall I'd say that's pretty usable for an SMG package in Airsoft. Right, that's enough of me babbling on here. Let's jump on back into Wales and finish up this review. Now that we're back out here in the woods, let's have a quick talk about things I don't particularly like about this weapon system. And to be fair, most of it is because it is an MP5K, they've had to make compromises to make everything work in here. So first of all, let's just talk about changing the battery, because that is a right faff. Now admittedly, there's not really anywhere else you could put the battery, however Bolt seem to have got the battery into the front grip of their MP5K, because obviously that area is all recoil space. So I kind of wish that was an option. Now beyond just changing the batteries, adjusting the hop is an absolute pain in the backside. Also, I found that not all mags are compatible with it. I would tell you which mags are, but all the MP5 mags I have, other than this one, I don't actually know the brands of because they've all come to me second hand. That being said, Cyma make a whole range of decent mid caps and high caps, so just buy Cyma mags and they will work in the Cyma gun. Now this isn't so much a problem, but more of a personal preference. I'm not a big fan of this massive flash hider, so when I play I tend to just pop it off and run the traditional 3-lug front end. So I've complained about this enough, let's talk about things I do like. Well, for one, I absolutely love the design of the MP5 The folding stock makes it very compact for when you're not using it and very easy to deploy and use. So I've quite happily run this on a sling with the stock folded as a secondary for when I'm sniping. I can very quickly grab it from hanging at about hip height up, deploy the stock and be ready to go. So I've used this going from sniping to running into a building, switching to this, going in, clearing through, coming back out. It's a very nicely designed weapon by H&K, fair play to them. Moving on to things that Cyma have done, the metalwork is very solid. Admittedly it's not steel, but nonetheless it's very solid and I doubt this will break anytime soon. And the polymer parts have a pretty good finish on them, no major moulding lines, and they fit onto the metal receiver very well with very little wobble between the upper and lower receiver. And despite the front handguard only being held on by 2 little locking tabs and the pin is absolutely solid on there, and look, I can just wave that around by it, no problems. In fact, the only part of this weapon system that has any kind of wobble is the folding stock. But even then, it's only marginal and certainly not a game ruiner. In fact, I can aim pretty happily with that. Overall, I think this is a very good weapon system for the sub £200 price mark. So, what are my thoughts on the Cyma MP5K-PDW? Yes, it does have its foibles. It is quite hard to change the battery and set the hop, and it doesn't have a working bolt as much as I want it to. But if you're looking for a nice compact submachine gun to use either as a sidearm secondary for like a sniper or a support gun, or you want a primary to use, then really this is a great little gun. Let's look at it in terms of what you get for sub £200. You get a metal receiver, decent quality polymer furnitures, and you get Cyma's rock solid V3 gearbox that we've seen in all of their AK lines that will just run and run and run until the world stops turning. So overall, if you want a nice compact PDW, look no further than the Cyma CM041K-PDW. you.